We are now at the end of our narrative of how Lucretius came back to Italy again after many centuries. We have seen his seductive influence on the minds of poets, painters, scientists, and philosophers. He would be an invaluable and even greater influence on the Enlightenment of the 18th century. But before we close this discussion, I would like to take us on Lucretius's voyage to America, to the library of a wealthy American planter, a man who had a talent for science and possessed a skeptical intelligence. Thomas Jefferson owned at least 5 Latin editions of On the Nature of Things, and he also owned translations of it in English, Italian, and French. Jefferson gave us our momentous political document, what Stephen Greenblatt states was a distinctly Lucretian turn. Greenblatt maintains that the turn was to a government whose end was not only to secure the lives and liberties of its citizens, but also to serve the pursuit of happiness. The atoms of Lucretius had left their traces on the Declaration of Independence. In 1820, the 77-year-old Jefferson wrote to John Adams, another former president, concerning matter and motion and the void. He said, on the basis of sensation of matter and motion, we may erect the fabric of all the certainties we can have or need. A correspondent wrote to Jefferson once, wanting to know his philosophy of life. This was the answer. I am, Jefferson wrote, an Epicurean.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow, you put a lot of research into that.
Yeah.
Do I ever?
Oh my
I
Each
do
God.
this every
lecture is
month.
like this.
I do this every month. I'm living it every day.
How do you do that in a month?
Well, you know, I'm retired, so I can do it, but it is not easy. It is not easy. This is a little easier because I'm familiar with the material. Sometimes I'm, 3/4 cold. I don't know it very well, and it takes a lot of fancy research and
Running to the library,
getting
books
stuff
shipped
from
in.
Melcat, the Mel
Wow.
catalog, and ordering books from Amazon and things. It's tough, but
So you
it's.
can't really trust everything on the web then? Is that what,
Oh no.
thanks to wiki research?
No, well, you know, sometimes it's okay. I mean, I think Wiki's okay.
It's good for a springboard, I think.
Yeah, it is. I
Yeah,
mean,
but you
sometimes
gotta
when I
check
look
it.
things up, you know, they're absolutely correct, you know, in what they say. It's something I know. Other times, you know, they're a little strange, you know,
Yeah.
so, you know, you've got to be careful. But I go back to the original sources, although I certainly do use the web, too.
You're familiar with the, there's a Google project, I believe, where they just scanned in all the documents
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, or they're
Yeah,
about
who-
to. I think they haven't done all of them yet, have they? Because there's still
They're
some
working on it.
copyright
Yeah.
problems.
Quite a
Yeah, I
ways.
think it's
Have you
in
ever looked
process.
into
yeah.
it?
No, I'm waiting. I mean, I'm going to assume that it's going to become available to us. The only thing that I'm working with now is like the Gutenberg project sometimes.
It is available to us now, though.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I should try it.
I've actually used it for about a year. You can type in, what it does is you type in search words and it will look
Okay.
back on all the scanned documents that it has down to, I mean, it goes back quite a ways.
How useful is it right now?
Well, you know, I would look up the word hell,
Okay.
okay? And you would see that in literature, but it'll give you a graph of how
Oh,
frequently
I
it's
see.
mentioned.
I
And
see.
like you wouldn't even hear of the word hell much at all in literature before
Okay.
1700 or
Right,
something like
right.
that. So, which led me to ask the question: when did all the translations come up with this word hell? Because
Right.
Hell
It grew along with the idea of the devil. Yeah. I have a lecture on that too. Let's see, which one was that? I think it was how.
Oh, the devil, part
Which
1, part
yeah,
2.
it was the devil, of course. Yeah, that's up on the web. The devil, part 1 and part 2. You know, another good source, but sometimes they're weak. It depends what they've been able to gather. Is atheist infidels. It's a secular web, as they call it. All you have to do is type in atheist infidels or secular web. But you know, I find it sketchy. It's you know, it's not enough for me. I'm still going back to books.
right. That's why I say a lot of the web research is you can't take it
No,
as
you
literal,
have to be
but
very
it may
careful.
suggest a direction. Because
It
a lot of
does.
good minds have done a lot of work and a lot of
Well, the
And so
bibliographies
as long
on
as you
the,
check it and.
the bibliographies at the end of the research papers are sometimes really, really helpful.
Yeah. So, y'all take it with a grain of salt the first time out.
Mm-hmm.
Just like in the concept during the lecture here, there's a lot of facts that I don't know.
Right,
So I mean, I can take it with a grain of salt at this
Sure.
point.
sure.
But, you know, that's just, I guess that's a
Sure.
skeptic approach to life. You don't,
Yeah, you've got,
you assign confidences to information.
yeah, I mean, I would like, I'm a little.
They're around here.
Yeah, you have to take them, of course, with a grain of salt. There's a lot of disputation about atheism. And I had told, probably Jim and Norma are sick of hearing this, but
Oop,
we
here's
went to a
another one.
lecture on,
You got it?
yeah, I've got it. On, what's his name, Christopher Marlowe, who wrote one of the Fausts.
Oh.
And the professor from U of M, she was quite knowledgeable. I asked her about accusations of atheism, and there were a lot at that time and everything, and she just said, no, it was impossible that, you know, they didn't have the thought processes at that time. And yet you read, you know, I didn't wanna, you know, start getting in a disputation with her, but you read, you know, like manuscript after manuscript, it's verbatim, because Marlowe, he was probably a spy for the government, so he always evaded arrest, or they picked him up and then let him go. But a lot of his friends were taken in. And it seems to me that they were very much doubtful of very many things.
Well, any absolute statement like that,
Mhm.
no one ever thought of this before then, and I mean,
They
and like
insist on
there's
it.
documentation of every thought humankind ever had,
They insist on it.
and they know it. That's a matter of faith.
It seems to me silly.
Yeah, there's no, when you make an absolute statement on what you couldn't know
Mhm.
anyhow,
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
yeah, it's just.
It
I guess
doesn't
we
make
take
any
it-
sense to
It can
me.
be in the realm of belief, but not knowledge.
I mean, there was nobody that was an atheist at that time. I mean, that just seems to me totally ridiculous. You know, like I said in my lecture, I mean, how many people would come forward with that?
I mean, the ancients had every bit of capacity we do today. They just didn't have the quality of information that we believe we have today.
Or the measuring ability, you know.
Or empiricism,
Yeah.
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 So,
Great here.
yeah, so,
Thank you.
but even though I think ancients had every cognitive capacity we have, the poor information, why it is that today so many people believe that those guys 2,000 or 4,000 years ago who wrote down were smarter than anybody today. Like,
They weren't really, but,
they were wonderful poets.
Yeah.
I like the first kick of the cat. I'm fascinated by all of it, but it doesn't make it truth just because they're old and
No.
dead.
no. Mm-mm.
You know, but-
But I find it quite remarkable what they were able to come up through basically a lot of logic.
Just thinking.
Norm
Thinking,
thinks a lot of it
reasoning,
was lucky
observing.
guesses.
Yeah,
Norm thinks a lot of it was lucky guesses.
but I was impressed, because I did read Lucretius, and I was impressed that he understood, you know, that the porosity of rocks allowed the water to
Yeah.
get through, you know, from one side of the cave to the other. And there were certain other things that he understood, that the force behind even the smallest, lightest particles, like wind, you know, like air, could do great damage. He understood that. He got that these must be particles under great force.
Yeah.
So I thought, wow, you know.
Well, those Epicureans, I mean, the good ones were really
Yeah.
good.
And even evolution, you touched on that
Mm-hmm.
just real briefly, is that the evolution, he almost got.
Mhm.
Mhm.
They were damn close.
Adaptation to
selection.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah, he almost had it. He
Mutation,
got the
yeah.
Well, how
parts.
about the swerve? That's like quantum
we changed.
physics. I mean, whew,
Well,
it is though.
but it's, you know, he's just, it's that guesswork. And
Yeah, I
it's
know,
the
I know.
magic. He never really explained why or how. He
Well, they
just said
didn't know
this
how.
was this random swerve.
But he had like thousands of observations, and he connected some dots and
Yeah.
came up with a theory. And
But we have no evidence that he was actually doing experiments, though.
Oh, that usually gentlemen did not do that.
Didn't do the experiments.
No,
So-
and it's a problem in Greece too. A lot of them did not.
I'll come around.
Yeah, it was considered work for slaves.
Did you need any sweetener, Mary? I forgot.
No,
Experiment?
thank you, I'm fine. Yeah, it was considered like beneath, although Aristotle conducted a lot of experiments, but that was by the Hellenistic age,
That,
practically. Yeah, it really wasn't done.
well, that's why I can't give Lucretius more credit, is
Yeah.
because he wasn't an experimentalist.
Of course,
So,
now we don't know because
you
we
can-
don't know anything about
You
it.
can be lucky for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
You can get it right.
Yeah.
Just because you guess doesn't really mean that you were really influenced by science, by the scientific method of doing
Gentlemen
experiments.
here,
So that I can credit
have
more
some goodies. Go ahead. No,
more
that's it.
people who may have been wrong, but we're still on the right track.
Yeah,
Just
You
beautiful.
know,
yeah.
than we're to say, oh well, this guy thought of the idea of particles. Because there were other things you didn't mention that were completely silly.
Well, that's why I
The-
didn't mention it.
the,
Epicurus had a lot of silly
that-
ideas.
that
That's why I'm
objects-
sorry that his science, we had that letter, some of the science, because, he obviously, he didn't have any ability to measure anything, and he came up with these ridiculous ideas, and most of them had ridiculous
Is
ideas.
this part of the continued discussion? or-
Yeah,
Yeah,
We're going on.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
Yeah. please, go ahead.
No, I was wondering, because you said we were gonna start a discussion after.
Yeah,
You did. You were
This is
discussing
the time to get to-
immediately.
Oh, okay.
to
Believe it or
Bill
not.
Murray.
Part of the,
I'm gonna include all of
questions.
that
you're
in the,
including, okay.
yeah, we won't edit that.
Sorry to
out.
interrupt that.
no, that's
Because
okay.
I'm hearing all this great stuff and I'm going, wow, are we gonna repeat this in a few minutes?
Yeah, no, this is the best part of it, is you get to ask questions and discuss.
Actually,
But-
the second part of Illusion of Immortality, the YouTube had more hits on the discussion than
Than
we
the
had on the
lecture.
lecture.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But that suggestion though about evolution, natural selection, mutation, all those seem to be
Incredible.
part of that. And if that was so, he was way before Darwin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But the scientific method really wasn't in force at that point. So
No, oh no.
so the fact that he didn't utilize that, he utilized what he had
Right,
and came up with some awesome theories.
yeah.
yeah, but you look at Gregor Mendel, all he did is plant beans.
Yeah.
He watched beans grow. You
Yeah.
could have done that, 1000 BC.
But they didn't,
Well, we're not sure, and I
Well-
want to ask you about that. Why don't we have more records of, somebody must have been trying,
There
just
was-
for practical reasons, experiments.
They were actually, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the author of the book. You could probably Google it though, and find out, or look on Amazon. He wrote an interesting book, which I kind of skimmed back when I was taking classics at Wayne, where he wrote about some of the actually scientific apparatus and what have you that they did make. That's kind of like been, in the background, and people hadn't paid a lot of attention to it. But there were a lot of people who were doing experiments, even gentlemen. I mean, even citizens of Athens.
Excellent.
So there was a lot. But really, I mean, they were building mechanisms that worked and sometimes didn't, and measurements and things. So yeah, we had that. But really, they weren't all that interested in science, except as theory, as like Epicurus and what have you. They all had, the Stoics had silly ideas too about the cosmos and what have you.
But they must have had some rudimentary understanding to build things,
Yeah, they did.
churches, cathedrals. They
Well,
had
no,
to-
that was later.
That was much later.
Yeah, it was much
Okay,
later.
so but even what can we talk about? The Romans, the Roman irrigation, sewers.
Yeah, they were great engineers.
They must have
Bringing the
known
water
Yeah.
all the way to
some
Rome.
engineering
Oh yeah, they
principles.
did. They
The
still
aqueduct.
use.
So
They
did that-
still
yeah.
use some of those aqueducts.
Did that get
now.
written down, or was that just completely pedestrian? Was that just
Well, the Greeks considered them pedestrian because that's what they did, and they imported Greeks for the philosophy.
but
And
there's
a
no
lot of
like
them were slaves because they had enslaved a lot of the Greeks by that time.
there was no book like how to build a sewer in Roman
That I
times.
don't know for sure, but there certainly probably were scrolls and things like that. There had to be some direction somewhere. Oh, yeah. there
Well, we're
had
all
to be.
standing on shoulders of giants, and so were they, so it's not like the aqueduct concept just came to a guy.
No, they
He
probably.
studied a guy who.
Yeah, studied the guy who
yes.
studied a guy.
Those, or some girls, especially the girls, they studied the girls.
Well, I don't think back then women didn't have much of a position.
But Greg, were there books, or was it just an apprenticeship, or was it just relearning
Verbal history or something.
verbally?
I would think it would be probably apprenticeships.
No, I think they had it, so many documents have been lost. I do think they would have to put that down in a scroll.
They'd have to.
They would
There's
have.
solid mathematics in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Write
Yeah,
your
you'd have to
math
do
out.
it.
There was
To
algebra involved.
prove it to the next guy,
Yeah.
that this is going to work. You're not gonna, this thing is not gonna come down on your workers' heads.
But you
when
could
put
have
it up.
trial and error, right? The one way would be just to try it.
But then
When it
how would you
failed-
how would you replicate it?
And how would you pass that on?
Once, I don't know,
I'm sure that they wrote it down.
but by 800, Rome was in ruins, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Rome was sacked, and all of that knowledge must have been lost. You couldn't have an apprenticeship. There was,
Well, things
they were gone.
crumbled away, you know, like, you remember what does Greenblatt say, that we have maybe about 1%
yeah.
of
from the
the,
ancient
Isn't that
world? I
amazing?
mean, yeah,
Of
I
all the
mean,
books.
it's awful.
Yeah.
So if, that was one of my questions, if the library at Alexandria hadn't
Oh,
been
that was the other thing,
burned,
the library burned.
would the books have survived even if they hadn't been burned?
I don't know, it's
I think
highly
there's a natural
doubtful.
deterioration. They would have to have been copied.
They would have all,
Yeah.
but you would have had to have an army of copiers.
Yeah.
Because of the number of,
Well, they probably would have been able to do it,
Yeah.
you know, and remember there was a
Humans and
printing
robots.
press coming along, you know.
but it wouldn't have even survived to,
No, probably not, it probably wouldn't, but, you know, we would have more than we have now,
yeah, and I think that's where the science is.
some of
It's in
it,
those rotted books that are
yeah,
gone.
sure, some of it, sure.
Um,
There's a lot of
There
things
were,
in
there
those
were
books.
over 100 Greek plays from the classical era. And there's only, what,
completely
6?
lost.
We have about 20
20
some,
some? Oh,
I
that's
think,
right,
or
there's
maybe
20.
18, well, maybe 18, I
18 to
can't,
22.
I can't tell you, I have
But there were
copies of
over
all of
100
them.
just from the competitions.
You know, the only
every
reason
year.
that they kept a lot of them was because if they were able to, like, they used them for, like, learning the law and things like disputation and what have you. So if there was a lot of argumentation and disputation and what have you in the play, it was preserved. That's
on how to-
it.
On how to debate?
Well, yeah, I mean, it wasn't how to debate, but the debates were so good sometimes between people and the gods or between different positions. You know, like in Antigone, there's a lot of, you know, thing, what you owe to the gods and what you should do secularly, etc. So they kept those usually that they considered good for
Educational. stuff,
rhetoric,
right?
you know, for learning how to argue in law cases and what have you,
Like
and
an ancient
grammar.
Judge Judy sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, except a lot smarter than her, you know. So this is what, this is what happened, and this is why they kept them. It's horrible. When I learned that, I said, oh my gosh, you know.
Now, on Lucretius, he had made, you'd characterize him as making some very positive, absolute statements.
Yeah.
Death is nothing,
Well, that's how
religion is
the
superstition, delusion.
Lucretians believe,
So
yeah,
they-
how the Epicureans believe.
His sensibility was that he absolutely knew these things. There are no angels, there are no
Yeah.
demons. And
Yeah.
absolute statements even today in a scientific context to disprove something's existence is a difficult thing.
It
I
is,
think
it is.
Heisenberg was the first guy to do that, right?
Yeah.
And it continues to be a difficult thing, but how did he come to this absolute position? Because he didn't have experimentation, he didn't have, but it's strictly thought experiments that brought him there. And I know we draw conclusions.
Well, remember, he
and
was
stuff.
an Epicurean, so he had adopted the principles of Epicurus.
But there's a certain absolutism that there's no humility in what he is saying. He's not very humble in his personality.
Well, they
just based
weren't.
on
The
writing.
ancients were not very humble, not the
They're-
thinkers and things.
Like he
They're not
pretends to
humble.
know more than he actually does.
Well, but I mean, they thought that they did. I mean, the Stoics were
Well,
the
they
same
thought they
way.
knew.
There would
Wow.
have been impossible, for him to know some of the things.
They
that he
didn't know
claims.
that, though. They thought that they knew it just through logic.
Yeah,
The
that-
Stoics had
that
these silly
objects
ideas too.
Emit particles, and these particles
Mm-hmm.
hit our eyes.
They were very,
As
and,
if it
and
was
as I,
coming
s-
from the object
and remember,
itself,
they
not
all-
from the light
You said
bouncing.
that.
He said that as if it was true. How
they
would
all-
he know?
yeah.
He was right,
well,
but
they all, well, but they were
No, it's the
wrong a lot of
light.
times
The
too.
li-
But remember, they
My
were all
shirt is not
denouncing
in.
each other because each one thought that they were correct.
So there was a competition. That
Oh yeah, they
was
were very,
driving
like I just read, they were very
Oh, they
egotistical,
were
very
egotistical.
curious
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah,
egotistical.
yes.
that. Yeah, that's what I didn't like about Lucretius. It's
Really,
like-
I did. I love it. I love it. I
But
love
it's like
their,
the atheists that we at the Detroit Atheists. It's the same way. They think they know it all and they don't.
Yeah,
well,
but
plus
they're
the
not.
only evidence we're seeing, and maybe the only evidence he would see, had that confirmation bias thing going. I have it. I think everybody does.
Yeah,
You know, when you're going out to pick your reading material or
yeah,
get interested in
Yeah.
something that catches your ear, it's because you're kind of on that
Yeah.
road already.
yeah.
And so,
Well,
But-
I don't know for sure that there's no immortality, but I do not believe that there is. Can I prove it? No.
that's where the concept of agnosticism almost
Yeah,
is like, well, I really don't believe there's a God,
yeah.
but I can't prove it any
Yeah.
more than I can prove there is.
Well, I
and
have some thinkers that believe that if you're on that, you're really on the road to atheism. But wait till I give my lecture on agnosticism. I just concluded it just a little while ago. It's really interesting
It's on the
because
road to
yeah,
atheism.
I'm covering the different types of agnosticism, which I must admit I didn't realize how many there were till I started researching it. So I'm very, very glad to be doing this project. Not only because a lot of people are tuning in on YouTube, but we have a lot of followers on YouTube and even some subscribers. So, but I'm learning for myself too.
Yeah.
But you don't
Well,
even know it, you're on a slippery slope to atheism.
Yeah, it's a crash course. And actually, that's how I self-identified as an agnostic until through your emails you were saying, well, basically, an atheism, through what Webster's, is just a person who doesn't believe God exists.
Right.
I have no evidence to believe he exists.
Right.
So why would I believe he exists?
Yeah.
And I do not believe he exists.
Yeah.
But I still identified as, I felt atheism was an absolute statement, and agnosticism seemed to be more like a reasonable conclusion
It
to
is
say, well,
for
I
some
can't
people.
really know, but I don't believe it.
Well, when I
So-
read your answer, I wrote to Norman and I said, this man is an atheist, really.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I
It's a-
remember I
yeah.
wrote you about
But
it.
I
I said
see
he's
that-
an atheist, basically.
As a straw man argument that you're using a definition that isn't the majority definition of what an atheist is. And also you're accusing me of having some knowledge that I can't really have rights to, that is, that there is no God. So I don't have any more knowledge, of course, than you do about whether there is a God or not. So how is it that I would have the nerve to call myself an atheist?
Right.
Unless I was, making it up or being not scientific, right?
So it was a misunderstanding of the concept of atheism for me too.
With a lot of
say that,
a lot of
because it's not an
atheists do
absolute.
not like agnostics. So this goes on and on and on. I feel like
So
a,
just a sector of
many.
atheism.
I feel like some agnostics are atheists, and I'm confirmed in that by thinkers that are better than I am. But then some are not. I mean, there's like kind of a almost like leaning to Christian or theism, agnosticism. Yeah, I'll cover that
Yeah.
all in my lecture. It's very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, I learned a lot
The Jews do that too.
while researching. Yes, yes.
Yeah, but the case of God is only a special case. Everything else that we would claim that isn't true, we don't require extraordinary evidence for before we say it's false or I don't believe it. So if I were to say I am the reincarnation of Walt Disney, you would say I don't believe it, Norm. I have no evidence
Yeah,
that you are the reincarnation of Walt
yeah,
Disney.
exactly.
So I'm going to say that you're not.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not going to
exactly.
say, well, maybe you are. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You'd say this is not.
Well,
there's no
some people
evidence.
might say that they're not sure though, if they incline to believe in channeling of the spiritual essence of somebody or something.
Or even some future prediction. I'm going to win the lottery tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you might win the lottery.
Yeah, yeah.
But you have no evidence that you're going to
Yeah.
win the lottery tomorrow. How could you possibly know and make the claim that you're going to
You
win
can't.
the lottery tomorrow?
So, but the claim is that I have no evidence that any God exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't believe it because it's not so much a position. Maybe agnosticism or atheism is not the word. I live a skeptical life.
Or maybe you're a skeptic.
Skepticism is more, I
Yeah.
approach everything like that. When I gain information, I will also assign a confidence in that information.
Yeah,
So I'm not just taking information, I'm also sort of sorting it.
trying to,
And
yeah,
if you approach life with skepticism, some things you get fairly certain about. And as your body of knowledge grows and your understanding of the world grows, when a new piece of information comes, if it integrates easily with that, it's easier to swallow because you know
Yes.
you've gone sort of a rigorous path to get to where you are.
I
And
agree.
if it's in contrast, to me that irks the heck out of me, and I won't, it's like a pit bull, I'll grab that information, and until I find out, either because one of two things is true, either that information is false, or my understanding of the universe is false, and I need to resolve that.
That's very good, that's a good way to.
So that's
to
how
put it.
skepticism, so.
Yeah.
That's a mature point of view.
Yeah,
But in your lifetime, could you ever imagine that we're going to find evidence of God?
I can't
And some,
imagine,
you
no.
know, tomorrow or 10 years from now, there's something that's gonna come down and say,
If
I
he
am-
does, I'll say, I'm sorry.
yeah, I
got
will
it
too,
wrong.
like,
I
I'm
know
sorry,
we
I got
all
it
would.
wrong.
we all would, right?
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah, I have no reason to close my mind to that. I just have no evidence. I have plenty of evidence that it's made up by people who have plenty of motives
Oh,
to
I've
want
seen
to.
it all over, yeah.
So wouldn't that factor into a reason to disbelieve?
well,
and say,
that's.
I can
why-
see why you'd want to believe that,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna guard against that want to believe
Yeah.
by scrutinizing everything you say, even with ever more
Yeah.
care than I would if if you just said, well, tomorrow it's gonna be rainy.
Yeah,
I
I
might not
agree.
scrutinize that as much.
I agree.
If you're gonna say there's a God, gee, there's lots of reasons why you or
Yeah.
any human would
Yeah.
want to believe that. I need to scrutinize that
Yeah.
with greater care.
But a lot of people, what they want to believe is what they believe.
Yeah.
The confirmation bias, and it's
Right.
a choice or a,
Right,
what you already believe,
right.
yes. You only
Yeah.
accept that information, at least you accept that information easier if
Yeah,
it's in alignment with
I
what.
mean, you hear this, that I couldn't get out of bed in the morning, I'm sure they would. They have to earn a living.
Oh, there's no God.
Yeah, if there's no God, you know.
Oh, yeah, why aren't you just sacrificing babies?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but you hear all these things.
But what I hear is stories of salvation. A gal told me the other day, just met her, she's telling me how she met Jesus. She had all kinds of bad lifestyles and stuff. She's sitting in a car in a parking lot, and suddenly she was knocked to her knees. So now I'm trying to
I
picture
hear
her
things
on her
like that.
knees behind a steering wheel,
How
because
do you do that?
I couldn't do it.
Well, it's metaphorical.
And so I kind of
I think
asked
it's
her
really
again,
fun.
and she said, well, I actually stepped out of the car and then fell to my knees.
I'm sorry, Jim.
And then she said, Jesus was talking to me. And I was amazed she was hearing voices. And then she said, Jesus was stroking my hair.
People say
And-
things like
and
that
I'm
now,
going, okay,
it's
well,
not,
that's
it's no
fine
longer
if that's-
considered mental illness, yeah.
If
It
that's your experience,
Do you believe?
how did that turn out for you? And she goes, well, I sort of believed after that. And I'm going,
Sort
now
of
wait a
believed.
minute.
Yeah.
Wait a
This
minute!
is the thing. If Jesus talked to me and
If
stroked
Jesus
my
was
hair,
talking, he's
I have
stroking
no
my
doubt
hair, I'd
anymore.
say, cool, I'm gonna
You know?
become a missionary.
Yeah, it's over. And she's like, and I didn't really, it was okay.
Oh, is that
Are
funny?
you kidding me?
But you did not believe her.
Oh, no, I think that these are, some of
She
these
must have
stories
had some kind
are
of,
either, she may be sincere,
Yeah.
yeah,
or she may just be trying to fit in with the crowd that says, if you say you don't believe, you're about to be
yeah.
evangelized
yeah,
at all
yeah,
angles.
I was just gonna
and
say
that's
it.
not very
Well, it could have
comfortable.
been a fantasy. I mean,
It
maybe
could have
she
been.
wanted to get out of her lifestyle and didn't know how to get out of it.
Right.
And, we were talking about these, last time I was talking about these out-of-body experiences and what have you. And it's funny because then we were talking, I just had two cataract surgeries. And how, I had to stare into the light for a while, and I can see how disorienting it would be. No, I'm serious.
Follow
I can
the light,
see,
follow the light.
follow the light. Yeah, I can see why people think it's a very real experience.
But there's another point to be made too, is here she's telling me this, and I have my doubts,
Yeah,
okay?
really, yeah.
So, but I've come to find over the years, and I could be wrong, that there's two main reasons people turn to magical thinking, which to me is any kind of religion, so
Right.
you have to
Yes.
leave a reasonable spot and go to a magical spot.
Right.
And there's two of the biggest reasons that happens is one, indoctrination from when you're a child.
Absolutely.
And you have no mental defenses. And the second is your life is in turmoil.
Yeah.
You live in hell, and you've hit a point where you can't even, you don't trust yourself, and
Yeah.
you're thinking about dying.
Yeah,
And you're willing to grab at any straw
Yeah.
that's gonna keep you afloat.
yeah,
And
I
and
agree.
so
Uh-huh.
you grab that
yeah,
Mhm.
and accept it. So when I'm in a conversation with someone, and you see if you're having like a debate or you're disagreeing in any way, and you see that emotion coming out of them, it is very possible that you're not threatening their belief system. You're actually threatening their survival.
oh, I believe that.
And so to continue it,
That's why I
is
don't like to
beyond
argue with
rude.
them.
so you need to just say, okay, that's awesome,
But they will
and
survive.
honor it.
Well, I think
They
that
will
that's,
survive.
I think
you
that
are threatening
that's,
them to that level, you know.
well, you know, but they'll get
You're-
so emotional and so hostile that you've lost the point of what you're trying to do is to
They're-
talk reasonably to them. That's why I don't like to
And
engage.
they will become very uncomfortable around you.
You know, this is why I think that they kill unbelievers, because I think it's, I don't know, like they psychologically they should do something like that. I think that they're trying to kill their own doubts.
Yeah.
It's just so frightening. Because why, if you
Which brings us
believe
back.
in some kind of creator, I don't care what religion it is, and you believe that you're going to have this immortal life or whatever, then why are you so angry at this person who's obviously going to
Yeah.
be like tossed into hell or certainly not have an immortal
Can't God
life?
handle your
Why are you so mad at this
Yeah,
guy?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
That
I mean,
person
or
is
this
not going to
woman.
be in the same glorious position you are.
Yeah, so why are you so angry?
Yeah, that's a
I
very
mean,
good
you're
point.
you're in the
It brings
driver's
us-
seat, it would
excellent,
seem,
yeah.
but you're not. They
Brings
lose
us-
control. They get crazy. They get hostile.
Brings us back to the 15th century.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Lucretius was called a humanist, or maybe he called himself that.
Well, at that time, he wasn't a humanist because he was from the classical era.
Well, what?
You remember the humanists were around the time of like about the 14th and 15th centuries.
I'm sorry,
That's the
Poggio.
ones we call,
Yeah,
yeah,
Poggio,
Poggio.
yeah.
Poggio.
Poggio was a humanist,
Excuse
yeah.
me, Poggio. So that word humanist, though, is that in any way connected to what we would call a humanist?
A little bit, but not completely because
It was more scholarly.
yeah, they didn't disavow belief in God. Some of them were Neoplatonists, so that they believed in the soul and images and what have you.
But why do they need this term? It didn't make...
Because they resurrected themselves, you know, and because they believed in studying man, and that man was glorious too. They believed in studying nature, and Petrarch wrote like nature poems and things like this. That people had been like turned to like, you know, God and the supernatural very heavily, at least, you know, in church theology. I mean, if you were working the earth, obviously you were into nature, but the thinkers and things. This was a great breakthrough, just that alone.
So the word humanities would also be that same...
Right, but
School.
they called themselves humanists,
Okay.
yeah. And they definitely were interested in you know, man's glory as well as God's. And that was like kind of revolutionary
Yes.
at that time.
And this is before the Enlightenment.
Yeah, oh yes, way
Yes,
before.
yes, oh yeah.
Way before. They started resurrecting things. Just
Before
the
the
fact that
Renaissance.
Petrarch was writing about like plants and natural things, tendrils of things in his poetry. I mean, you know, just glancing at it, this was like a huge breakthrough. I mean, people hadn't been doing this for forever, since probably Rome fell. It's incredible.
It's a great thing when a writer actually starts thinking what other people were thinking.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. People were thinking it, but nobody was expressing it. You know.
You mentioned the Garden of Epicurus.
Of Epicurus, yeah.
Epicurus. What exactly did they do? Was this a school, or was it?
Yeah, it was a school
a
of philosophy,
commune,
but
or-
it was like a commune. It was like, we would call it a commune, they wouldn't. It was like a school of thinkers. Gosh, I can't remember her name. Martha, somebody give me her name. She's a lady philosopher. great. I can't remember her name. She's written about the Stoics and the Epicureans. I'll check it out.
I imagine these guys in robes just like walking around, you know, the vineyard. Is that what it was, or was it more than that?
Well, it was, yeah, it was basically that. I mean, they also retired to write their things and things like that. But yeah, it was a lot of discussion, a lot of letter writing. They paid attention to their families if they had families outside. They were living like a normal life, but kind of like, retired from the hustle and bustle of Athens.
And some of them were students of others? Or
They were
mentioned?
students of Epicurus.
But was it a school, or was it just a peer group?
No, it was a school. It was a school of philosophy.
And so by school, that means a class? There were classes, or? Was it
Well, a school of philosophy, there were classes. I shouldn't say there weren't classes. There was like mainly a lot of dialogue between the head philosophers and the students. I mean, you had the same thing with Plato, his academy.
But that's what I'm having trouble
But the
understanding.
students would
Is
take
there any
notes. Well, they
kind
were
of-
philosophers and they were also students. So I mean, Epicurus and probably some of the more advanced philosophers would probably lecture to the newer ones or the ones who weren't as advanced. And then they would take notes and things.
Yeah. Do we have any modern equivalent of this environment?
No, I don't think so.
Because I don't understand how it would sustain itself. You would either write or you would lecture, but all the other students would be consuming and then going on to something else, right? You can't have everybody teaching.
I think that probably a lot of them, had a certain amount of independent wealth. And Epicurus had people that liked his theories and they contributed money.
Yeah.
So there were wealthy people would come also, or fairly wealthy, and they would, keep the thing running.
But the majority would just be passing through, wouldn't they?
Some would pass through, but I think a lot of them stayed there from what I understand.
If one of them's rich enough, they only gotta pass through once.
Well, yeah.
Because, I don't know what they would do. These students would consume the lectures,
Yeah.
and then what? What would they?
They'd probably discuss,
they would
discuss it, yeah.
And then they would.
Well, it looks like they were,
Discuss more.
remember, some of them probably went off to convert people. It was a missionary type of philosophy, which was very unusual. So there was probably a lot of that. They were probably like circulating in the society, and then coming back to the garden, circulating their ideas. That would be very important. Remember that most of the philosophers, Socrates, Diogenes, most of them circulated in the society at the same time. Remember they had the agora, which was a big, like open space where they would have
Agora,
business, and that was, that's where they would discuss things, and they would discuss things with ordinary citizens.
Could I also suggest that may have just been one leg of their education, that they all had vocations, they may have gone into government, they may have gone into many other fields.
Epicureans did not believe in engaging in those kind of things, and medicine, no gentleman engaged in at that time. No
So the
serious
students
Athenian.
wouldn't have gone there and
No,
learned
now
that and then
politics,
gone
yeah,
off
but
and got a job.
Epicureans did not believe in engaging in politics. They thought it was almost dishonorable.
Well, would they let anybody into the school, or did you have to buy it wholesale, everything, and become an Epicurean?
Wow.
I would
Monastery.
think you would have to buy most of it
You have to buy
at
into
some
it completely.
point.
You couldn't just say I want to go on to something else, but I'm going to stay for a little while.
Oh, I don't think so, because that was, the point was not I want to go on to something else. The point was to
Yeah.
stop there. That was supposed to ameliorate, all your fears and delusions and
Wow.
things.
see if it's a monastery arrangement.
Yeah,
That's
except
where
there
your
was a lot
question
more
would, I can see your
pleasant.
question. I mean, monasteries at least get alms and donations from people who think they could buy in a stairway to heaven, but in this case, who was feeding them? If you were supposed to just check in and
They
never
had
check
wealthy
out.
people. They had wealthy
Then-
people that, contributed, and people that came
Yeah.
were more than likely wealthy, because you couldn't not live like that if you didn't have some money.
Yeah.
I think it was
Yeah.
a mix of people
So-
who did not have money and people who did.
The monastery model doesn't compare then to this, because you would be praying most of the day in
Yeah.
a monastery, and then you would
No,
Be working- you'd be working in the fields.
Interacting
Yeah.
intellectually,
They probably
Um,
had slaves to do the
having a
menial
good piece
work.
of cheese,
Yeah,
while you're discussing something.
yeah.
But from a practical point of view, Jim, I just don't understand how they could pass all that time, 8 hours, 12 hours a day, talking about this stuff.
Well, they were
Day
probably
in and
reading
day
and
out.
studying.
They were studying other people's work.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. It's a completely different experience than what we would have, in the modern world. We would go to school, but you're studying and then you're going on to
Well,
the
you're
next.
studying to do something, and most Athenians did, but there were a lot of professions that, like, Athenian citizens did not engage in.
Interesting.
Almost nothing with the hand. Actually, the British aristocracy was like that for a long time.
Any other questions? Do we have any reason to doubt the accuracy of Lucretius on the nature of things, given that it was copied so many times?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because remember, that I doubt it, because it sounds extremely Epicurean.
Okay.
Okay.
The ending was really rather flat, if I remember, reading
There
it.
was an illness going through Rome at the time,
Yeah.
and they think that perhaps he succumbed to it.
Because he talks about people suffering from this plague,
That was the Athenian plague, though.
Athenian
That
plague,
was
and then it just ends.
He probably died.
You think it really was never even finished?
Yeah,
Was there
or
like a
maybe.
scratching pencil down the page at the
Yeah,
last
or
page?
maybe people
Worst
died
copy.
very quickly then. He was about 50, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah,
So
He
it's
was
not
already
unusual to die.
past his normal lifespan.
Yeah.
that seems to be the only flaw. Well, there's other flaws, but yeah, that was the only outstanding.
Or something else happened in
weirdness
his
about
life
this.
and he didn't complete it.
I think he would have put in a man with the kind of ego that he had. He
Yeah.
would have put in a bold ending.
Oh,
It's
I
just
think
not
so
there.
too. No, I think it trailed off, and I think there something interrupted it, either illness, death.
Or they lost the last page.
Yeah, or
Kept
possibly they lost it, but I don't think so. I think it was complete as it was.
When because I actually listened to it on an audiobook, I thought this would make it would make a great stage performance.
Oh, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That you would have to take some liberties because it's so long, but it would make a great performance or a movie
Yeah,
as well.
I don't think anybody's ever done that.
Nobody's ever done it. That's what I was
That,
going to
that
ask.
I know of. I mean, don't quote me because it seems like everything's been done, but I'm not familiar with it. And I remember I spent quite a bit of time in the classics department at Wayne, and nobody mentioned that.
I'm going to shop around Hollywood and see what I can
Yeah, I was
do.
gonna say, why don't you
Sell
shop,
it for.
shop
I
around?
got this
In,
screenplay.
in Cats, wasn't there a character named Lucretius? So maybe.
Yeah. Because the visual, I was imagining what he's describing, various natural scenes of the river and the erosion and the animals, that you could have like a speaker or a narrator either on camera or off camera filming this beautiful montage
That would be
of all of
nice,
these
Norm.
scenes, and then the narrator, delivering the poem.
Norm, that would be really nice. I'm surprised that some like experimental filmmaker hasn't done something like that.
Yeah. As a stage play, it doesn't interest me as much because
It would be very hard to present a lot of the scenes.
the content itself,
That would be interesting.
by modern standards would be kind of silly to do but as a movie, I think it would be a beautiful film
Yeah,
because you could do so much
I
visual.
think that's cool. I like that.
So if
Don't
I
lose
you
that
need
idea.
a filmmaker, we can
You can shop it around.
I'll do the screenplay and
You would
adapted
enjoy
by Lucretius, adapted by Norm. Other questions. These monasteries, would they have made the effort to actually catalog their books of what they had in their collections, or do they just stick everything?
I think some did, but I don't think that they did a very good job of it, to tell you the truth, especially the older ones. They might catalog the Christian manuscripts.
So that Poggio would have to have physically looked at everything.
Yes,
in
yeah.
the-
Although they might have had them in like certain categories, like they might have had, like all the Roman stuff kind of mixed in all together. Remember, he found a Latin grammar.
Yeah,
They might have had everything like that in one section.
and this was the original was written in Latin. right?
Oh, yeah.
But wouldn't it have been a completely different Latin than what Poggio would have known in the 14th century?
Yeah, what Poggio would have known would be more like Church Latin, but remember, they were educated, and they were educated in the classical Latin.
So he wouldn't have had trouble understanding what it said.
No, he shouldn't have, not one of the humanists. Now, other people, yeah, if they were like just, like merchants or something like that, if they had not had a good classical education,
Yeah.
they probably would only know the Church Latin. But you know what? The Church Latin is very close to the classical Latin, because I remember that it was because when I was taking Latin, they also showed us some Church Latin. Now I'll tell you, it was easier. I can tell you that.
Okay.
But yeah, he would have a real grounding in the classical. That's why they like to read those works, even if they distance themselves from the dangerous ideas, because the expression of them was so incredible. The grammar, the thing, and that was all classical Latin, not Church Latin.
Because I think about English even 500 years ago, it was different, and then the Latin, was now, it would have been almost 1400 years old.
Well, but like I say, I studied a couple years of classical Latin, and when they gave us Church Latin to look at too, I found it easier to read. It wasn't that hard.
You
So you mean
said
it didn't change much over the 1400 years?
It changed, but there were a lot of things that were very similar.
Okay.
And that, I
It
would- I
actually
would
had been
imagine that-
simplified somewhat, the grammar and what have you. So
I would
it was
imagine
easier.
that's why there was so much excitement coming across a grammatical book,
Oh yeah,
a book of grammar.
yeah,
a
yeah.
Latin
Something
grammar
like that would be very important
from,
because this was the point. Yeah.
From 100 AD. Or
This was
that's
part of
early on,
humanism. This love of the
'cause that would have
classical
the
authors.
classic stuff in it.
Yeah, this was part of humanism.
you mentioned that Lucretius wouldn't have known the Abraham story. Why are we so certain?
I can't imagine why. How would he have known a Judaic story like that?
Because he wouldn't have run into Jews or Jewish scholars or.
He might have run into some, but how much cross-cultural referencing we just don't know. People made a lot of assumptions, and it turned out that it probably wasn't the case. They thought that somebody had been to India, and it turned out that they had never even been near India, nor were in any Indian scholars in their area. That's why we don't know how much the Greeks got from the Indians on atomic theory and vice versa.
So it kind of sounds like you don't know, no one can know. It's very possible he knew the Abraham
Yeah,
story.
some people we know traveled to certain areas, but others we don't. So we don't know how much cross-fertilization there was. There were cynics in the Jesus's area, Galilee, I believe. Cynic philosophers. So I mean, some people that all these many faces of Jesus, they think he was like a cynic philosopher or something like that. So I haven't followed to find out like what those guys were doing there. It's very odd to me that they would be there at all, but there they were. So those ideas were circulating at Jesus's time. He must have picked up some of them.
If you were well read, I would think that you'd, especially if he, like, it's one of those positive statements, religion is superstitious delusion, I think is what you'd say.
Yeah.
That was his words.
Yeah,
He
it's
must have
also mine though
understood
too.
religion to make that statement.
Yeah.
It's like, I often do hear people condemning something they've never tried,
Well,
Three nights
remember,
in the hymn story.
as I said, that they were brought up in the the pagan religions.
The
They were
Roman.
brought up in the belief in the gods, and I mean, yeah, Epicurus had some bad examples from just a little earlier in the society. I've gone into that in another lecture just recently on blasphemy, so I haven't gone into it in this one. But Socrates was put to death for forms of blasphemy. They didn't call it that, but they called it impiety, and that was like, that doesn't sound, I've written it in my lecture, that doesn't sound like much just impiety, but like it was something horrific and terrible. There were a lot, Protagoras, a lot of people were, like during the classical era, Athens was fighting Sparta, and they weren't, winning, and then they had a plague, and they had military defeats and they were going downhill, they were on a decline, and then people became very vicious about the gods and the belief system. And it really meant, if you didn't believe in the gods in most of these city-states and in Rome, you didn't really believe, you weren't loyal to your country or your city-state.
Yeah.
We're very close to that here in this.
Yeah,
country.
we are getting close to that here in this country.
Why
I
do you
hope
say
it
that?
doesn't.
That if you're not Christian, then you're not American?
You're not Christian, you're not an American.
Some people say
I
that.
think we're
Oh my
beyond that.
goodness, I've heard that.
No, I don't think we're
But
beyond
but
that.
that's
You're not
rhetoric,
with us, you're against us.
that's rhetoric from the
Yeah.
Christians.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
not policy, that's not the government
It's not
policy.
government policy, thank goodness, but it's scary.
But you mean like running for office, you could
Mhm.
say you're
Yeah.
an atheist.
Well, you elect that person, that means that attitude is gonna end up in your legislature.
Yeah. Well,
And
that's,
even atheists running for office have to say they thank God every morning or they
Yeah,
don't get
yeah, or
elected.
whatever, yeah, yeah.
okay.
That's what I
It's
think,
scary, but yeah,
Yeah.
it, you know,
Yeah, I think we made a lot of progress, but yeah, I have to concede that point.
Christians
Still.
were, you know, put to death because they wouldn't, you know, make sacrifices to the gods. And that was considered, you know, dangerously disloyal. I mean, a lot of times the judges used to exhort them to please, you know, like do a little incense, you know, because, you know, they were saying, you know, we're not loyal to the Roman state, as well as saying I don't believe in the gods.
Yeah.
And then they were saying that the gods were devils, and that was really bad, you know, I mean, so, you know, this was intermixed, and there were a lot of examples, which is probably why Epicurus was careful.
And that dangerously close to that in this country concept, I saw an interview with Madeleine Albright, and is that her name, Madeleine Albright? Foreign policy. kind
Yeah,
of gal,
yeah, she
right?
used to be the Secretary of
And,
State.
The
Yeah.
former Secretary of State.
Yeah, short, fat
And
woman.
someone asked her, she asked her about getting religion into this concept of foreign policy, and she said that, well, Armageddon is not acceptable foreign policy.
Yeah, that's pretty
Good
good,
for
I
her.
like
That was
that, good for
wonderful.
her,
Good for her.
Good for
We just
her.
can't bring that to the table, you know,
Oh,
we're not
very
gonna die
good.
anyhow.
very good. But today, I think, or was it yesterday, they sang Amazing Grace, some of the Republicans in the House.
Yeah.
One of the guys from Florida led them in these verses, I guess. This is
Living on a
supposed-
prayer.
Yeah, this is to help, yeah, this is to help us, I guess,
A
with the
friend of mine said
impasse.
that the Republican Party had aligned themselves with the religious right because they'll believe anything.
Oh, is that funny?
So- and then you hear some of the stuff they're saying, and you go, wow,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
become
it's-
scary, it's become very
you know,
scary.
You can fool some of the people all
The
the time.
time, yeah, yeah, exactly,
Back to the 15th century.
okay.
You know, you mentioned that there were definitely atheists in the 15th century and the
Well,
16th
it's
century.
believed that, yeah, I mean,
Well, I think
Davidson,
you
I think,
convinced me,
did a
I mean,
fantastic job,
yeah.
yeah, it wasn't me,
But-
it was Davidson, really.
You know, what I want to know is politically what was going on that would have turned the tide even slightly towards disbelief or doubt or atheism. What was it that we can say, well, there were in the 15th, but there wasn't in the 12th century? Is it just that we don't have the records, or was it really true a change, or maybe a weakening of the grip that the church had?
There was a weakening, remember Lutheranism came along about the 1600s.
That was later.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but still, I mean, we're
yeah,
talking
Norm's
about,
asking earlier.
oh, much earlier.
Well, the
Was there a
15th.
plague or something?
There
Well, there were
was-
plagues,
There
there
was a
were
very
plagues.
serious
What kind of
plague.
God?
And you're also close to the cold, the unseasonably cold seasons
Yeah,
that they had in
remember, we
Europe
talked
at that
about
time
that, about witchcraft.
that goofed the crops.
They had a
Yeah.
mild ice age.
Yeah, yeah.
At that time, yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
there were
suffering
things
comes
going
back.
on. It wasn't really, it was somewhat political. A lot of it was like these religious divisions that were going on.
They were multiplying.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all of a sudden, the church wasn't the monolith that it had made itself into.
Yeah, and that the Greeks were no longer a threat at all to one's Christian belief.
Oh, no,
Yeah,
Oh, no,
that's
they-
what I was struck by.
not at all.
Is that they cared so little about these books, they didn't even want to burn them.
Yeah, that's what was
They're-
sad.
they're
They were
just-
yeah. At one point, now some of the early church fathers, they had to almost like force themselves not to read that kind of the classical authors anymore. You know, they had to turn themselves to the Christian works, even though they loved these classical authors so much, and they just trained themselves not to read them. It was kind of sad. But was worse was when nobody even cared anymore.
So it would be likely that, even though we don't have any records, that there would have been less atheists in the 12th century than in the 15th century.
More than likely.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that there weren't any atheists. To me, that just doesn't make any sense.
But
But quietly, not, you know, there had to be some people that were skeptical.
I would expect that all through history.
Me too, me too.
Yeah, I would accept that.
I mean,
Absolutely.
you know, you take me, I mean, if I had been at that time and I didn't believe, I mean, I would just be very quiet about it.
I would, if I were a priest, I'd even give communion.
They were,
And
they
give
were,
take sacrament, give sacrament.
they were.
I think that goes on today.
Oh, yes, they certainly do. A lot of them don't
I'd just
believe
go
it.
right
I
along.
think that if you study your religious text enough, it's almost impossible to continue believing it.
A lot of them have
So-
left the ministry. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
now a,
Some give up and
What's
leave,
the
some
name
give
of
up
it,
and stay.
Norm?
the clerks, I know what you're talking, the clergy project.
yeah, the clergy project where, you know,
It's the giving.
people are trying to help them, you know, like,
Walk away.
yeah, walk away and
They're
get new
unemployed.
careers and things and be a support group. Yeah.
What if we had not, if Peugeot, I should say, had not discovered Lucretius? I mean, what difference would it have really made to the Renaissance, to the Enlightenment? We would have just rediscovered.
Lucretius was
coming up with
apparently
ourselves.
like very vital to the Enlightenment. So it wouldn't
Slowed
have,
it.
it wouldn't have, you know, like changed anything, I don't think, but I think it would have given them less ammunition. That, you know, this was, they saw that this was a way to think, that earlier people had thought like this.
That there was
That was-
something before Christianity
Yeah.
that was important.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was really important because those copies of Lucretius were in private hands. They wouldn't have like gotten loose till much later.
And those were also complete copies, the ones that
Apparent,
found.
as far as we know, yeah, they were the same.
Yeah, that kind of what if question is kind of obviously hard to answer. What if he wasn't here and would it have happened otherwise? And
Yeah, no, it would
probably would
still
have, the
have.
timing would have been different.
I
Yeah.
think so.
It's like asking if religious zealots didn't
Yeah,
stop scientific discovery for 1,000 years, maybe we would have had a nuke at 1200 AD,
Yeah.
there's a
and
Yeah.
before we should have.
there's a
I don't
scientist
know.
that says that you know, we watched him on, where was it? We watched him on some program about unbelief, and you know, he said that they like had killed a whole bunch of people because they held back, you know, medical discoveries and things, and scientific discoveries. He's an atheist, and you know, he was a scientist. I found that very interesting. He was very adamant about that.
And so it's
You know,
it's even true
think
today
about
when you
that.
stop stem cell research or you stop
Thank you.
Yeah,
the
Yes.
and that's the thing that seems to be overriding in this whole thing. When we say it's likely there were atheists all through history, it seems to me that if these things are still happening today, both believers, unbelievers, people stopping progress, and it was back then, it's almost fundamental to humanity that we've got this distribution of some people against others, and somewhere there's somebody thinking almost anything.
Yeah.
And there's larger groups of them here or there or anywhere. But how it's like if you look at the history of mankind, we were 10,000 years ago a bunch of warring tribes, and
yeah,
how has that changed?
not much.
We're just bigger tribes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so if the human condition hasn't changed
Well,
through all
but
these
we've
years,
also like made like great breakthroughs too. I mean,
Technologically,
philosophically,
yeah.
medically, you know, scientifically.
Yeah.
as we lean towards skepticism
Yeah.
and empiricism.
Yeah, and I think that there's some movement to secularism if you look at some parts of the world, and
Oh, yeah.
certainly Europe.
Well, I still hold that it doesn't really matter how faithful you are. If you break your leg and the bone is sticking out of the skin, which building do you go to first? The science building or the religion building? 100% of the time you go to the science building,
Yeah.
and then you call your prayer group,
And then you say,
and then you
prayer.
testify at the next service that the prayer group saved
Help.
you.
Yeah.
But you went to the science building.
Nancy
not
Christ-
first.
Wait a minute, you say, Jesus Christ, I broke my leg!
You know, you always said it. Yeah, that's right.
Well, you know, they've done a little bit of a breakthrough on cancer research. I was just reading it this morning in the New York Times online, and they, what they found out that cancer kind of like sheaths itself from the immune system. with these molecules. I can't really explain it, but
It's
it was
encapsulated.
funny. They had done some experiments, tests on people that were like given up for lost, and it worked for them. And a couple of them, don't you know that they said, like, I have a lot of people praying for me?
Yeah.
And the other guy said, like, God didn't want me to go right now, so that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And I go, well, then why did you subject yourself to these medical, like, all these things, like, they had gone through every
Well-
course of thing. God wanted him to,
Well,
I
it's true, the
suppose.
whole world is just full of stories of the doctor gave me 6 months,
Yeah,
but I'm still here.
yeah.
And we all pray, and you never say, you never mention the chemo,
chemo,
when you're
the
telling the story. You never
radiation.
mention it.
Yeah, that is funny. That is funny. I hate that. It drives me
Yeah.
just
They don't
absolutely up
see
the
it.
wall.
It's like you don't even see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I saw Gail lecturing. She actually started a prayer group helping people who are terminally ill. So because she got a CAT scan, there was some inflammation in her lymph nodes. She went to do a biopsy, and as she put it, and they couldn't find the cells. This to me sounds like a negative diagnosis.
Of course.
Okay, but she just knew the cells were there, so she had to have some people pray over her, and now she's okay. And now that's what she's doing for other people. It's not really the medical.
boy.
We just need to pray, and we'll all
Oh
be
my
good.
Lord.
Terrific.
And because it's frustrating me, but that
It is
I'm sure that
frustrating.
didn't happen back in the 15th century or whatever.
No, yeah, well, there weren't many, a lot of the monks, like ministered to people, medically.
Yeah.
They probably, some of them didn't do such a
Leeches
bad
and
job.
bleeding
Leeches
and
and
all?
stuff, sure. And some, like natural substances that they
Herbs
knew how to make things, herbs and roots and things. So maybe you did run to the church at that time,
Yeah.
Maybe it's
The
a
church
hang-
was the science
Yeah,
building.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we have a hangover from that. But that does irritate me. Years ago, Jim had a heart attack, and I can't tell you how many people from his school and then from our neighbors, they would they were glad that he was better and blah blah. And then you go, God is good, It was
Yeah.
just so irritating, and I would just, bridle. I would, just kind of. I didn't want to say.
What if he was dead? What would you say
Well, yeah,
then?
then what would you
God is
say?
still good?
Yeah, I mean, God is bad. I mean, it was so illogical.
It was his time.
But it's rote.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the interesting thing that this culture doesn't accept that, because I was reading about etiquette, and they said never to write to the family or say to the family that God willed it.
It was a
Yeah.
good
So
thing.
I think Americans do not want to hear that.
It's condescending, yeah.
I don't know that it's so condescending when it's actually, if you believe it, then why? I don't know why it's condescending. I mean, think about it. God willed it. He's supposed to will everything, isn't he?
It's dismissive, though, of their feelings, I think is what they would say, is that you're not really validating their loss. You're
Maybe
just saying
that's
that
it. I
Oh,
don't-
well, it's in the scheme.
He's in a better place. We're still here. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
What-
condolences. You're
One
still
of
here.
the guys we
Yeah.
walk with in the morning, we don't walk with him, we walk
In
around.
the
But
same area.
yeah, he was in the mall, and he was telling us one day his brother-in-law had passed away, and his sister, they had several cars, and his sister had given him a very nice car that her husband had driven, and so I said, well, I'm sorry for your loss, I meant his brother-in-law, and he said, well, he's in a better place, and then he started talking about the car. It was so funny.
And
The
so
car's
am I.
Yeah, so am I. I never
He's in
had
a
such
better
a great
place.
car in my
I can
life.
drive to better places.
Yeah, it was so funny. But I mean, he said it with a great deal of piety, but immediately changed the
Sure.
topic. It was so funny.
I think it's meaningful that Lucretius chose immortality to talk, to criticize in his book, to focus on this fear of death as one of the main points of his book.
Yeah.
Of all the things that he might have talked about. I know he talked about the science and atomism, but he also could dismiss, this obsession with what happens after we die. That
Well,
was
that's
important.
because
That's one of the key
that was the
points
key
of,
points of Epicurus and
Epicureanism.
Epicureanism. That's where he learned it from.
Yeah.
I'm sure, because he was your classic Epicurean. Epicurean later. But what's interesting is, and I've read some scholars who have talked about that since, that The modern mind doesn't really get that ameliorated from that knowledge because we're really very wrapped up in our consciousness. And we really don't want that to end. And I
Yeah.
understand that because, you know, as much as I admire and love Epicurus, and I really do, it never really cured me of any fear of death. I mean, you know, I think maybe they had a little different outlook, but I don't like to think of my consciousness, you know, ending, you know. I understand certainly what they were saying, and I think they're correct. But we're really wrapped up in our consciousness, in our thinking
Yeah,
processes.
but there's a difference between fear of death because of the option of hell
Oh, yeah.
versus
Oh, boy,
fear of
forever.
death as
Yeah.
just an ending.
Well, yeah, I hate to have
And,
everything
yeah.
end. I mean, I like my life, so, you know,
Yeah.
yeah. Very much. I really
You know, like
enjoy
who's
it.
going to feed the kitten, huh?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. Who's gonna read the next book?
But you know,
You know, what do you mean? I can't read my next book? I have to go up and adore God?
Probably.
That would kill me even worse than like just plain dying.
but
Can you
it
imagine
seems-
going to heaven and adoring God all day? Oh,
No books.
yeah,
No
no
It seems
books.
meaningless though when you choose your life's purpose to have a good lawn, and then you die and it grows long, and it's like, I mean, the next day.
Yeah.
I mean,
It grows what?
it just grows
Grows,
again,
it
and it's no
grows
longer
again.
a nice lawn. Your whole
Yeah.
life, it was perfect. Or cleaning a house. See, I
Yeah.
have a religious. I'm religiously opposed to cleaning the house.
Oh.
If I want to mop my floor, I'll just wear socks and walk around. So
Yeah, I understand.
I have a
course,
religious
my
thing
girlfriend
about
just loves
cleaning the
that part.
house. My house has to be
It's
clean.
the opposite.
okay.
Yeah, and I have this religious, which I hate because it's a waste of time a lot, you know? It's a continuous conflict all my life, you know?
I'm agnostic, I go either way. Not sure.
Oh, Nora, is that
It
funny?
doesn't bother me at all.
But I don't know, is that so wrong if a person makes that their life goal? I mean, is that so terrible? I mean, to us it seems silly.
Are there more goals that are more meaningful than
Yeah,
others?
there are, but I mean, I don't think everybody's quite capable of those. When,
Yeah.
when we used to walk outside more when we were a little younger, and we didn't mind the cracky sidewalks, and I would see some of the older ladies that have now passed away, or you know had to go to the nursing home because now they have dementia, and they would be working their house from morning to it's like a hobby. I don't know that it was so bad. I don't think that they were interested in books or they
I'm
would have
not
sat
passing
down.
judgment on
Yeah.
it at all. I just personally, there's absurdity on either side.
Yeah.
I mean, how much meaning can a life have anyhow? We're just one little speck in this huge
Exactly.
universe. It makes absolutely no difference. But if you are here, can you make it a better place? Like retirement's coming up, and I can either play golf, pursue the leisure sciences, or arts, I think they call them, leisure arts.
Could be science.
Or perhaps I could mentor somebody and contribute to the future, or both. I don't condemn either one. I think that for me, I'm definitely going to be all about the leisure arts, but you hit an age where you're consummate and you understand more about something, and for some reason society says, okay, you're done. You really got no value. No one should listen to you
But
anymore.
that's not
stuff
really
like that.
true. I mean,
And-
there's so many things that retired people can
But
do
the
now.
individual can make it.
It's an
so.
individual choice. I mean, and I think some
It is.
people just choose. I don't think it's because actually even the society tells them that they should golf. I really think that they make that choice to do that a lot of times because there are so many other options.
So which one's better?
Well, for me, there's no question. I mean, pursuing the leisure arts or mentoring or whatever you want to choose rather than playing golf, but I don't like golf.
Well, comes down to that.
I mean,
Me
P.G.
either.
Woodhouse is a tremendous writer of, amusing books. And I mean, people still read him with a great deal of pleasure. He was an avid golfer and he wrote really funny books about golfers and their obsessions. Who's to say? Was it really bad that he was dedicated to golf too, as well as his writing?
It's not, but as we talk about life's purposes,
Yeah.
and this is probably where I find myself irritated, is that one thing that we truly own, our time,
Yeah.
for most of your life, you pretty much sell it to somebody else.
Yeah, that is the
And
truth.
it's-
Oh, no, that's
It's
interesting.
almost like a prostitution of sorts.
Yeah, I
And you
agree.
probably, at least early on in my career, it was true. I really enjoy my job now, but I didn't really like what I was doing. And so I was selling my time
Yeah,
On the
Yeah.
planet.
for the dollar. And
Yeah.
was that a purpose? So,
unless you're
Say if it's
independently
all
wealthy or you
meaningless.
win the lottery, I mean, you
That's
have no
what you would
choice.
do.
well,
But I think
as a
you-
youth, I always questioned, well, how I don't want to be part of this money system. I want to live as I see fit. And as I analyzed it, I found out the only thing I needed to do that was more money.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It was
Yeah,
almost an
prepare that.
impossible conundrum
Yes,
to solve.
yes.
You
Yeah,
just-
it's society.
it's not a worthy cause, but
But there are jobs that you can take, in nonprofits and what have you, that certainly are a little helpful,
Whereas a consultant work half-time, work half the
Yeah.
year and half the year
Yeah.
is your own.
There are people that
is
do
what
that.
Michael
Yeah.
is.
I was a 4-day-a-week guy. I was a 2-day-a-week guy for a couple of years.
Oh, good.
But I was working around people that were full-time, and I'd be like, I don't know how you guys do this 5-day-a-week stuff. Now I'm doing 5 days a week again, so
So, well, if you're enjoying it, why not?
I do like it now.
Well, see, there
And
you
I
go.
think the difference is, even though I'm selling my time, I've decided that being in support and interested in other people's success makes the whole damn thing different.
Yeah.
Sure,
It's almost, the money is not what brings the joy.
sure.
Interesting.
And I think Lucretius would have said that.
Yeah.
If he probably would have agreed with me if he was right here.
That money is not the.
Well, he probably had a certain amount to live on.
Yeah, so it's
Most
easy for
likely.
him
I
to say.
doubt if, we can't be sure that he wasn't an educated slave that had gotten his freedom. Because there were really, good philosophers that had done that, but I suspect that he was from a fairly well-off family.
Did he have any successors that we know of?
We don't know anything about it.
Because Rome, wouldn't have fell even to Christianity for another 200, 300 years, and then, or longer. So would there have been somebody else that was an Epicurean after him?
There were. I mean, you find
Right up
it
into,
Herculaneum
400?
and everything, but the
500?
one of them just wrote bawdy lyrics, so he wasn't much of an Epicurean. And a lot of these things, were the villa at Herculaneum, they can barely decipher these charred remains. I don't think that they're ever going to do much. They keep trying it, and I don't think it's been too long. I think
Okay.
they've been working at it now too long. We haven't gotten.
Well, then we
much
need to
out of it.
write something.
Maybe another question comes to mind as we're talking is there anyone else, that's analogous to Lucretius that came later, that was maybe on the right track but just so far ahead of his time that was forgotten and then only rediscovered recently, or that we could say, point back and say, this is the guy who almost would have had it, if he had just had a little bit more of experimentation or science behind
Well, we
it.
know about them though.
But I'm thinking
the
of Gregor Mendel.
The Enlightenment. Well, but he was a monk, so
He was unknown
Yeah.
until much later,
Yeah.
and then they went back and
Yeah.
then they found it.
Yeah, but you know what? There's not many like that. The people that were naturalists. You take the Baron de Halbach. He was, he wrote what was that? The famous atheist work that he wrote. Remember, when I did La Maitre and all those. They were writing atheism like crazy.
And that was the 16th century.
No, that was the 18th. That was
18th?
the Enlightenment.
and the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
But they were never lost.
No, they really weren't. Although sometimes we don't realize how, I think that they've been really resurrected now that there's more of a secular atheist movement. I really do, because a lot of people didn't know about them.
Because I think about the history of technology. There's people that didn't have the electronics to build a
Oh,
computer,
yeah.
but they had the concepts right.
Oh,
They
yeah.
had a lot of the concepts and the language. The idea of a computer language to control a
Yeah.
machine. There was no way for them to ever build anything like that, but there was plans for that.
Well, the Enlightenment atheists were the same way. I mean, you didn't know about really evolution for sure until Darwin came along. And then you didn't know until they resurrected Mendel how those traits were
Genetics.
like,
when-
inherited.
So they were theorists, not experimentalists. Or
Yeah,
empiricists who-
Yeah, I'm sort of just now painting a broad brush and saying these were theorists who were just happened to be on the right track. I think of Jules Verne, A Trip to the Moon
Yeah, yeah.
in 1850.
Yeah,
Come
stuff like that.
on.
But everybody knew his book, it was popular.
Okay, but
Yeah.
so that's true. But he was so far ahead of his time.
Yeah, and people didn't take it too seriously.
They couldn't take it. It was one of the earliest science fictions. But he
H.G.
had
Wells
this
was
concept
writing that stuff
of
too.
we'll have a ballistic
Yeah.
launch
Yeah,
to the moon. Well,
Yeah.
guess what happened in
Yeah.
1969? We had a
Yeah.
ballistic launch.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, these guys. Well, a lot of those early,
Ballistic.
science fiction writers
It's a
were
rocket.
those.
It's non-ballistic.
Well, it had this explosion, right? Chemicals that launched this enormous.
I think it's a matter of terms. Ballistic is you launch it and let go of it.
Oh, I see.
Like a guided
I see.
missile
I
is
see what you're saying.
non-ballistic.
I see
and
what
a
you mean.
rocket is you steer it.
Well, you steer.
But
So
it was
is
awfully
non-ballistic,
close. It was
but
the
Okay.
idea. It was a
it's the
general
concept that
idea.
it's
though.
impulse drive or whatever that but I know it's just a distinction and
Yeah.
I put it out there.
But that's true. Obviously, we had to have the ability to control this darn thing, or it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
But the idea of this chemical explosion pushing you
Fascinating.
up all the way to the moon.
I think
Yeah.
after about the, like 1800s, I think that, we have these.
we would have had the records.
Yeah,
So then we just have to focus on, well, who was so far ahead of their time
yeah,
that would cause me to gasp and say, wow,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
gee, I wish this person had been born a little later so
Yeah.
we could have done it then. That's all. And but I won't discount that we still may discover some of these things
Well, I think we shall,
in
yes.
somebody's attic, somebody drawing. There was a computer in Germany, in Nazi Germany, electronic computer. Well, it was relays, but it was so close to what we would now describe as computer architecture, and IBM took an interest in it. And this was during World War II. This guy was
Wow.
building this. He wasn't a Nazi, but the Nazis wanted to use it, for calculations and whatnot.
Pretty incredible, huh?
So there's yes, it's known, but it's not well known, or it's one of those things where it's so underappreciated. But when you dig into it, you realize, gee, these guys were visionaries, were really ahead of their time, and they don't always get credit just because they were the first. By no means is that guaranteed that you're ever going to get any real
No,
credit.
no, that's the trouble, yeah, you don't always, yeah.
So could I ask a question? I know this probably goes, we've been looking back, there were people way back then who felt that they got to the truth. I think we kind of could say, we sit around this room today and we say, I think we've arrived at some truth. Some of it was there way back then, and
Well, there'll be more
so
later.
it's like, to me, the question is, especially in engineering, and you could ask, what's the application? So it's like you got pure science, there's some history here, there's some development of principle, and it brought us to a point. It's kind of like asking, well, computers made it from Germany down to this thing in my pocket now that is, if it just had like 2 more functions, I would marry it. But so here we got truth up to this point. Where do we go? What is your vision or potential thought? I mean, right now I think the concept of atheism is definitely not a majority.
Oh, it's a
It is
minority.
growing,
It's growing.
but where's
Slowly.
it all going? Is this leading eventually to everybody sees what maybe this room would consider the light, and
Well, I
religion
think it'll-
completely disappears?
I think people might be like indifferent to it, like they are in some of the Scandinavian countries, many of the people.
I think it'd be like astrology, where
Yeah.
most everyone doesn't take it seriously,
Yeah.
but it's still there,
It's still there, yeah.
floating around, and there's some people actually making their living at it.
Yeah,
But it's so far from the
the
norm.
mainstream,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
the standard
So it's
deviation.
always been, it's not persecuted and you're not murdered for it now, but it's always been probably as a minority.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is today,
Yeah.
and your concept or beliefs about the future are that it will continue to be just that, sort of a marginalized system of thought within a large group of people. Like
Oh.
we're at 3 or 4 sigma out there.
No, I don't think
No,
so.
I'm sorry, you
I think-
misunderstood me.
Yeah,
It's
I don't think so.
atheism is gonna triumph. The religion it's gonna be on the fringes.
Ah, I see.
Yeah,
I'm sorry
that's
if I
what he meant.
wasn't clear about that.
He meant
There's
it'll be
always
on the
gonna
fringes.
be, say in the next 1,000 years,
Yeah.
this idea of, God and the religion. Some people are still gonna believe it, but they're gonna be increasingly outliers.
Marginalized.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
so,
astrology.
So does the graph kind of a percentage show that trend?
It's showing it
Yes, it does.
somewhat.
It is showing a slight growth in terms of disbelief.
Of
It's more than
the
slight.
nuns.
It's called
the
nuns.
NONES.
NONES.
However, that's
They're now
problematical.
designated, in the surveys and the measurements that are being taken by the social scientists and the psychologists, they're now designating a group called NONES, nuns. It's a general group, and inside nuns are agnostics, atheists, whatever.
So by none is
But there's
No
also
religious-
people
But
that
there's
just
also people who are spiritualists, they just don't belong, they have none, no
see
religion.
what they're saying
none.
is that they don't subscribe or they're not members of a
Church.
specific religion.
well, then that doesn't really address the issue of if they're included in the group, then that graph is not what we're looking
That's
at.
about all that you can do right now.
Well, no, they asked whether
Well,
you're an atheist, whether you
Yeah,
believe in
well,
God or
and
not.
it's very small. It's about 3 to 5% generally.
Yeah.
And what was it way back
Atheists and
then? We don't know.
agnostics.
No,
No,
It
we
may be
don't.
the same as it's always been.
Well,
No.
disbelief is rising among the young.
True
like now
disbelief is rising.
Yeah, the
There's no
millennials
doubt
and
about
things.
it.
Yeah, they're
It's not
definitely.
just, I'm not affiliated with the church.
No, it's definitely rising.
So
It's
then the concept comes that, and this is something, of course, just in joining the group, I know it's my first day and everything, but when you say you're an atheist, you're identifying yourself almost as what you are not. and to identify yourself as to what you are. When you say that
I see what
non-belief
you
is
mean.
on the rise, you're saying what they're not is
Oh, I
on
see
the
what you
rise.
mean.
What are they going towards? You would identify yourself as an engineer. When we talk about what is self-identity, I'm a father, I'm an engineer, I'm an inventor, which is just an artist trapped in an engineer's body. Everyone has identities, right? But atheist is an I'm not something concept. So
Well, it's a disbelief. It's a
And there isn't
positive
gonna be
disbelief.
anything to
Yeah.
fill that, what you would, what we call religion, there isn't gonna be anything for atheists to take that place, to say,
Yeah.
oh, I'm this. I mean, I call myself an existentialist. That's a philosophical framework.
that is a positive claim about
That's a
what
positive
you are.
claim. I don't call myself a humanist, although I lean obviously in those directions towards
Yes. And
caring.
if you did, it would still be a positive claim.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there isn't going to be a new, something positive claim to capture most of these people who are leaving religion.
How about sane?
Being sane, being
Sorry, I
human.
didn't mean to offend anybody, but
Well, no, I mean,
Um,
there's a lot of, there's a lot of people that will embrace spiritualism, that kind of weak,
New Age.
Yeah,
woo-woo.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we had
Woo,
a
yeah.
lecture, alternative medicine.
Yeah,
and
yeah, I
alternative
gave that
Medicine,
lecture.
covered that.
Yeah, that's gonna be, but, there's a philosopher in England, and he doesn't think, Bruce Sterling, and he thinks it's low salience very much, the spiritualism. He thinks people will move more to indifference. He thinks that
Indifference.
United States is maybe about 50 years behind Europe, but he thinks that United States is moving in
so
that
that would be
direction too.
his opinion, and the truth may be in alignment with that.
Yeah, who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows? It seems to me every time you turn around, you hear something about God in this country.
Mhm.
There's nothing, I don't believe there's anything wrong with moving away from something and not providing a substitute. That rejection itself is a cause,
Yeah,
it can be valid,
Yeah. Yeah.
rebellion without having to say, no, I have the new answer,
yeah,
because I don't, but I do know what I don't want and what isn't good for most of humanity. So moving away is still a good thing. But it frees up our time, Sunday morning you can go and do political action or community
yeah, or
organizing.
anything you want, or
Or
sleep
your
in.
hobby, or sleep
Mhm.
in. So obviously people are gonna find groups of like-minded individuals to hang out with on Sunday morning where they wouldn't have, they've been going to church. So
Mhm.
there'll be positives coming out of all that.
Yeah, well, I mean, even some of those people that aren't going to church, they're Christians. They would identify as Christians, but they're certainly not very good Christians or not practicing Christians.
Yeah.
They're out canoeing or there's something in a group of people, and nobody really cares too much. You know.
And I think that helps atheism. That
Yeah,
that
it
helps.
does.
Every weakening of a religion
Yeah,
helps.
it helps.
Further the atheism, if you look at it as a scale.
Yeah.
Well, here was a concept for a positive claim is free thinker. And I don't see if that's really totally aligned with the concept of atheism, but I think free thinking is the idea of your thought not being hindered by magical
Yeah,
beliefs.
right.
If I got that one right, I
Yeah,
don't know.
pretty-
In fact, when
pretty
I
close,
was,
yeah.
with my yearning to get away from and be able to have intelligent conversations with people such as yourself, at least people who agree with me, which by my definition makes you intelligent.
Yeah.
So, in my yearning, free thinking is the first thing I was typing and searching for, and you couldn't find even just this atheist group. Now, look, I live in Oxford and I work in Novi. If you guys were a little farther out of my way, I'm not
You're
going to
probably,
be.
yeah, I can't.
I'm already.
But you know,
totally-
there's so much on the
That's
web.
You know,
it's
There's
right.
so
I
much
saw a lot in Ann Arbor
available.
going that way. So
Well, no, but I mean, there's so much on the web. There's daylight atheism. There's atheos. There's about 50 million. I mean,
Websites, but
Websites.
you wanted some.
I like human
Live.
beings. Yeah.
How about
Oh,
that?
okay, you
How about
went,
that?
Yeah,
human
yeah.
contact.
But
Yeah,
the
you-
concept, again, was the issue of positive claim. Atheist tells you what I am not.
Yeah,
It
but so
doesn't
does-
tell you what I am.
but so does free thinker.
is more of a positive.
No, it
So does
isn't.
free thinker.
It was
Well,
always considered a rejection
I
of religion.
I think
Traditionally.
I think
Yeah.
that we like to call ourselves atheists because we've, committed to a certain position, and it's not a respectable term for many people. They distrust you. They think you're gonna, I don't know what, rob their house,
Yeah.
cheat them at
Well, you have
taxes.
no moral basis.
Yeah,
so
right,
what the
right.
heck?
So that's what a lot of Christians figure, and
Yes.
I think we've just decided to take the harder route and just say we're atheists.
Mary,
Stop any.
Though this term, free thinker, came out of the Enlightenment.
Yes,
right?
it did.
For
Yes.
those people
Yes.
who were rejecting
Yeah.
God,
Religion, God.
and they were searching and they were inquiring
Yeah.
and they were rationalists, and that's all
Yes.
great.
Yeah.
It's all me, but it was still a movement away from religion.
Yeah.
It wasn't like
Yeah.
I'm going to found this new movement, that's separate. It was breaking away.
Some of them did, like
From-
Comte. He
To
started like he tried to do a sociological type religion. It was kind of
Yeah, the
atheistic. It was
French
silly. Yeah.
during the Revolution
Yeah.
tried the same thing.
Yeah,
the
yeah,
anti-religion.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just doesn't work. I like calling myself an atheist. It's uncomfortable sometimes around Christians.
And but it does imply that
We
you
went
are.
to a
It's a
philosophical
negative
thing,
claim.
which shall be nameless. The three of us. Remember, and it created a little bit of stir when I said I was an
You're a
unbeliever.
non-believer. Yeah.
And the guy next to me that had started the talk
was a
about
young
God,
guy.
because they weren't supposed to be like discussing politics or religion. My husband, I didn't realize it. He
I
just
observed
said,
him.
my husband saw it, and he said that he was
his
telling
chair
what he-
started to squeak.
yeah, he really started to wiggle. That
He was
guy,
twisting around.
that guy. He just
What?
didn't like it when I said that.
Huh?
Yeah, Jim
What?
observed it.
Huh?
I later have taken it as saying, well, I'm not a subscriber.
That's a good way.
Well, actually, in England, I think from what I understand, when I read British novels, which I read a lot of times they answer people by saying, "I'm not a believer."
Yeah.
And I think
would
what
say
I
that.
said in that group was, "I'm an unbeliever."
Yeah, I would say I'm not religious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your participation. It's been a fascinating discussion, and I hope that next month when we discuss Buddhism, that we'll have the same group and we'll have some interesting ideas.
Thank you, Larry.